First, a See Here Christmas special.
Hello and welcome to London and our second See Here Christmas special. Like last year, it's been produced with a great deal of help from our European and American friends, and we'll be hearing and seeing from them a little later in the programme. So now let's get on with it.
We have a rich blend of cultures in this programme because our theme this year is communication and storytelling. The storytelling comes a little later as we're going to start with communication. Now Clive's not in the studio. He's making a film in the City of London and he's got something to ask me.
Now a question for you. Can you tell me how big is the City of London? Any idea what size it is?
I've no idea. It's like asking how long's a piece of string. This is a trick question.
Now I knew you wouldn't have the answer. Well, I'll tell you. The City of London is very, very small, in fact. It's only 1 mile square. That's all.
Go on, it's got to be bigger than that.
Yes, it really is that small, 1 mile square. And this is where it starts, or at least one place where it starts. On most of the roads leading into the city, you'll find a griffin or dragon. And this dragon marks the boundary of the city limits. On this side, I'm in the city of Westminster. And on the other side of the dragon, I'm in the City of London. Now it's a tradition which goes back many centuries that some very important people, including the Queen, don't enter the city without the permission of the Lord Mayor of London. The City of London, that is. Well, it doesn't look as if we're important enough. There's no one here to greet me. Well, never mind. I suppose I'd better be off. Now, of course, the history of the telephone is quite a short one. It hasn't been around for all that long. The telephone was invented in 1876 by Alexander Graham Bell. And since then, it's made rapid and major advances. But how did people communicate before the telephone? This museum tells the story. And it's an interesting one, because it looks as if the language of signs was all important. Telecommunications means communicating over a distance. One of the most powerful ways people have done that in the past is by using fire. I mean, what could be more visual than a great big bonfire on a hilltop? When the British Navy defeated the Spanish Armada in 1588, the message was sent from London to Portsmouth via a chain of fires. British Telecom's Museum of Telecommunications starts with these early systems of visual communications. A beacon is fine for sending a single signal. But if you want to say anything more complicated, then you need some sort of language or code. rather like the system of flashes sent with a heliograph, or the smoke signals used by the Red Indians. Do you know what that was? I've just signed "See Here" in semaphore. The position of my arms relates to different letters of the alphabet, rather like giant finger spelling. Now this is fine over a short distance, but if you want to go further, you need bigger arms, literally. Claude Chappe built a signalling device on huge towers that could sign letters to each other. Like the beacons, chains of towers on hilltops passed messages over great distances. My name is Claude Chappe. I am a Frenchman, and the year is 1794, and I have just invented a system of semaphore. This machine here passes messages by changing the patterns of these wooden arms here, moved by turning these handles here. It was pretty hard work sending messages mechanically and limited by the weather. If it was bad, you couldn't see it. But before any great improvements could be made, someone would have to discover electricity. Well, I've managed to send a message. Welcome to the telegraph office. Honestly, the 19th century has seen incredible changes in technology. In 1825, a clever chap called Sturgeon invented the electromagnet. Then, two men, Cook and Wheatstone, used this technology to develop their electric 5-needle telegraph. And with this, they could send messages, letter by letter. Have a look at this. The needles work in patterns to spell out different letters, attracted by electromagnets. But this was about as far as visual language went. Morse code came next, which became a sound-based system of dots and dashes. And then, of course, came the telephone. Honestly, you buy the latest equipment, and 5 minutes later it's out of date. Whatever next, I don't know.
The telephone, it's all the night.
The telephone has been with us since 1876. So, for over 100 years, deaf people were excluded from the world of telecommunications, waiting for the invention of the fax and the text phone.
Do you want a little warning to make you get up in the morning? If your house is on fire, do you want to set a fire? Just lift up the receiver, that's all you've got to do. And we will walk you through.
Since 1901, Marconi has been working on radio signals. And that's been going on for 20 years now. In fact, the only breaks in progress have been war. Wartime put a stop to the spread of the telephone. But since then, hearing society has turned into a phone-mad culture. The telephone has changed with the fashions of the decades to become another consumer item. Well, we've seen communication technology go through all these rapid changes until we've reached the stage we're at today where things are really advanced. But I feel a little jealous because hearing people have access to all of this technology. Where are we deaf people? Well, because of some of the improvements in technology, we can at least use faxes and, of course, text phones like minicoms. But it's still not enough, is it? Because hearing people, when they use the phone, can actually use their first language, which we deaf people can't. But at last, we're getting the advent of the video phone. And that's going to mean at last we can actually communicate using our own first language and be on a par with hearing people. Well, let's now go back to the studio.
Now, some of you may have seen a video phone before. They have been demonstrated on television on a number of occasions. But I doubt whether you've seen this one. It's a special one. Bigger screen, better view. And it's been developed by BT and a number of European telecommunication companies. There are 9 countries involved at the moment. The idea is that each country will have a network of these video phones, all geared to help people with special needs gain access to communication. There are already plans afoot to set up some trial terminals here in Britain between interested parties, the RNID, 2 schools in the London area and a local authority. They all hope to have access to this system so that deaf people will be able to talk to each other in sign language without any other assistance, on equal terms with hearing users. And of course, these phones will be set up in centres of special interest to deaf people, such as advocacy units, interpreter centres. Just think of the important places. A great step forward. Now, how does it work? The main point is that it's not an ordinary telephone. It's a digital system, so you have to have a special line installed. But once that's done, you treat it as an ordinary telephone. But of course, be careful. You have to remember that when you do phone people, this camera is watching you. And so is the person at the other end. So, who shall we ring? Now, some of you may remember that last year we had a film clip from Sweden which showed 2 young deaf girls who were reading classic books. Many deaf people were impressed by the fact that these books were being read, since they are not the kind of books read by most deaf children in Britain. So we thought this year that we'd follow up on that story. We asked them to turn up at the television studio in Stockholm so that we could have a conversation with them. I hope that they are now on the other end of this telephone.
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Hello, this is Sweden.
Hello, Sweden. This is Carol.
Hi, Carol, this is Janne.
Can you tell me who you all are?
My name is Sarah.
Who is next to you?
My name is Jenny.
Hello, Jenny.
Janny.
Hello. And you are?
I'm the father. Sorry, I can't speak or sign English, but my name is Göran.
It's the first time for me, and I feel rather concerned. Do you feel the same? Very strange.
Yes, we do.
Sweden, can you just hold on for 1 minute? I have a surprise for you. We have a guest with us who would like to talk to our guests in Sweden. He is Ramon Wolf. This is Ramon.
Hello. I think I saw you last year on our TV sets, and what you were reading was brilliant. Now, here in Britain, deaf children, I think, wouldn't have access to literature like you do. And you have the same sort of level of access as hearing people. How come? How do you get this?
When I was a child, my parents always read books for me and my sister, and that was sort of the trigger for where I started off from. And I also asked my parents what different signs meant.
Now, I know you read books like Dickens and so on. I mean, do you read them for pleasure, or do you read them at school, or do you read them at home?
I read it for pleasure. And it doesn't have anything to school to do. I read it for pleasure too.
Now, do you find that your parents help you with reading?
From the beginning, my parents helped me, but nowadays I'm read myself. And when I was a child, my parents read the child books and storytales for us. But from then, we started to read ourselves.
Are your parents deaf or hearing?
Hearing.
This is a question for the father. How, why and when did you learn to sign?
I learned quite early that my daughter was deaf. And I started to learn sign language by myself, but it was not that good quality of training that I had. It was difficult to learn the sign and remember the signs, and I started off with simple signs like flowers and so forth, and then I went on to a sort of a class where I trained sign language.
So both mother and father, did you sign stories to your children when they were growing up? Or what type of stories did you tell them?
Both my wife and I just love to read, and we started to read books and stories, and we tried to think of sign language as equal to any other language. So we looked at pictures and drawings and in the books, and we translated the script into sign language, and we started off with a simple level and then on to a more academic level.
Because sign language is recognized in Sweden, do you think that makes a difference?
Yes, I think it means a lot. When my daughter was born, I didn't know anything about deafness. I had to read about it. And I understand now that sign language is very important for deaf people. And it gives deaf children a language where they can build on from the very early ages. And I think it's very important that sign language are recognized.
We wish you a very happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas from you too. Bye-bye.
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 Well, I believe that's another first. I don't think we've had a live, signed conversation between countries before, and that's a very welcome development. Hearing people, and I was one of them, take so much for granted. They're used to all the technology and the different methods of communication. Radio, television, gossip, books, magazines, and all the rest of it. Sign language itself is as flexible and as subtle as spoken language, but it's ephemeral. As it's not a written language, it's not generally recorded. The result is that the culture associated with the language is often lost and not passed on. We don't know of any books of deaf stories. Now, for most hearing people, the words once upon a time conjure up a world of fairy stories and fables. It's a magical world of Hans Christian Andersen and the Brothers Grimm, and all those stories my parents told me, and the ones I've told my children. I'm also told that many of those stories are not the ones that deaf people know, and are not the stories that deaf people tell each other. That became obvious this year when we asked our colleagues in Europe and America to send us stories from deaf people. We didn't get what we expected.
Geräusche.
Well, visual jokes like that are ideally suited to deaf culture, and there are more to come from Denmark as we now start our compilation of all the stories sent in. And this year, quite a large number of them have been produced specially for this Christmas programme.
Ano, Štědrý den u nás začínal tím, že dopoledne jsme šli navštívit hřbitov, abychom uctili zemřelé, protože oni s námi u večeře nebudou. Odpoledne rodiče nás poslali ven, aby mohli v klidu ustrojit stromeček a připravit dárky. Večer začínala štědrovečerní večeře pravidelně večer v 18 hodin a před večeří jsme se vždy pomodlili pod jmelím. Po večeři, při večeři seděli všichni u stolu a jen maminka mohla vstávat. Když jsme dojedli, drobky zůstaly na stole, aby jsme měli po celý rok dosti jídla. Někdy jsme chodili na půlnoční mši, nebylo to pravidelně. Druhý den, 25. ráno, ještě než jsme se nasnídali, jsme si popřáli navzájem příjemné svátky. A k obědu u nás byla tradičně husa, knedlík a zelí. Byla to dobrota. Odpoledne potom nás navštívilo hodně lidí, byli to přátelé a hrávali jsme s nimi loto, domino. Bylo to opravdu velice pěkné.
Vy jste byli velká rodina, u vás bylo 7 dětí. Jaké byly vaše Vánoce?
Protože jsem z početné rodiny, tak bychom měli skromné Vánoce, dělali jsme sami papírové řetězy a nejhezčí jablíčka jsme věšeli, ale bylo to opravdu krásné Vánoce.
Vánoce vždy byly a jsou svátky lásky, klidu a radosti. Nechť vy všichni, milí přátelé, u nás doma i v zahraničí, kam jsme dnešní vyprávění pamětníků také poslali prostřednictvím magazínu BBC, prožijete letošní vánoční svátky stejně tak krásně, jako je prožili naše účastnice dnešní besedy před 50 lety.
The title of this story is The Gift of the Magi. A woman and a man, they were very poor. They had to scrimp and save for everything, but they were very happily married. The woman had beautiful long hair. It draped down over her shoulder. And one day she was thinking about, she really wanted to buy something beautiful, a beautiful gift for her husband. As she was walking into town, she happened to notice a sign. The sign said, "We buy hair for wigs." She reached up and touched her hair and decided to go into the store and let them trim off her locks. She had a tear come down her face, but she was so glad she got the money and went shopping to find something. She decided she was going to buy this beautiful gold watch chain. So she got home very happy about her purchase. Her husband was also thinking about a long time ago his grandfather had given him this pocket watch. It was a very cherished gift, but he decided he needed to buy something beautiful for his wife. So he took the watch and walked into town. He gave it to the storekeeper, and with a heavy heart, he sold his watch. As he was walking through town, he noticed in a store window a beautiful pearl and gold hair comb. So he went in and he bought the comb, and walking home, he was very happy. But when he got there, he opened the door and he noticed his wife had short hair. And when she looked at him, she says, "Wait, I'll be right back." So she ran and she got the gift, and the two of them looked at each other lovingly and gave each other their presents. She opened her gift and, oh, she couldn't believe it was so beautiful. And she reached up and touched her hair, and she says, "Well, I will let my hair grow back so I can use these beautiful combs." And the husband, he nodded his head and opened his gift. And he looked at it and he lifted up this beautiful chain. He attached it onto his belt. They looked at each other lovingly. Christmas time, one of the most precious gifts is the gift of love.
Interesting that apart from the humour, there was little evidence of deaf culture there. Those stories come either from the hearing world and books, or are based on fact and personal experiences. So, are there any real deaf stories? Are there any deaf equivalents of the Brothers Grimm and Hans Christian Andersen? Are there any deaf Little Red Riding Hoods or Peter Pans? We thought that we'd do another link-up, this time with our colleagues at Gallaudet University in Washington. What do they have to say about original deaf stories? Are you there, Gil Eastman and Mary Lou Novitsky?
Hello, Clive. Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays. We're thrilled to be with you today.
To answer your question about original deaf stories, Clive, we do have them here in America, and it is a very important part of our culture. But our inherent stories tend to be embellished versions of real-life situations and should not be confused with a signed adaptation of a Grimm's tale or a Dickens classic.
Our language is a visual language, and we only recently have had access to affordable technology that allows us to document our culture in earnest.
For example, this 8-year-old TV program, Deaf Mosaic, at Gallaudet University, now houses the largest video archive about deaf people in America. See Here is our European counterpart. Our collective efforts will help preserve deaf culture for future generations and establish new traditions for all to share.
When thinking about what kind of story to tell you during this festive season, we decided that the story should be about our good friend and jolly fellow, Santa Claus. And I decided that Gil would tell it, because he is an actor, you know. Gil?
Recently, my wife and I invited our 2 grown daughters, their husbands, and our 2 granddaughters over for a family dinner, and most of our conversation was about how soon Christmas would be here and how many gifts we needed to buy. This family gathering reminded me of a special Christmas over 20 years ago when my 2 hearing daughters, they were about 6 and 8 years old at the time, begged and begged me to take them to visit Santa Claus. Okay. My wife and I packed the girls into the car and off we drove to see Santa. When we arrived, the line was incredible, so we passed the time by telling stories to each other in sign language. All of the hearing people in line stared at us, but we ignored them. When it was our daughter's turn to visit Santa, he looked at them with an enormous smile on his face, and I gently nudged my daughters to go up and see him. Santa put both girls on his lap, and to our surprise, he turned off his voice and signed. "What do you want Santa to bring you for Christmas?" My daughters were shocked, and I was awed. Santa can sign, and also help a deaf daddy share in the magic of the holiday season. Our youngest hopped off Santa's lap and ran to me. "Why didn't you tell me Santa Claus knows sign language?" Wisely, I informed her that Santa has to know many different languages, including sign language, so he can bring his gifts to children all over the world.
Oh, that's a sweet story, Gil. May Santa bring you and your family everything you wish for this Christmas. And to you, Clive, and to all of our friends at See Here and around the world, have a very Merry Christmas, a wonderful holiday season, and a prosperous New Year. So long.
All those stories have been very interesting to watch and analyse. It's been fascinating that none of them have been new original stories. It confirms what we had thought, that deaf culture is not so much in the story as in the way it's told, in the use of the language. BSL, ISL, ASL, and so on. Our difficulty as deaf people is that up till now our culture has not been written down, but as I speak, the BDA is holding a reception to launch their new and long-awaited BSL dictionary. That may help that important culture gap between generations, because deaf children are usually born of hearing parents. It's a wonder that our culture and our language has survived at all. But what we have discovered is that we are not the only people who don't write our culture down. Hello. The costume's absolutely beautiful and the dancing. But can you tell me what it's got to do with storytelling?
Kathak, the North Indian classical dance form, it originated as a form of storytelling. There was a tribe of storytellers who used to go around the country telling stories from religious scriptures. And in time, in about 2,000 years, it added dance pieces, more dance movements, and this is what you see today.
So why are your stories not written down?
It's much more interesting to watch a story being enacted, and as writing, not many people could read writing, so it was much easier and interesting way to convey our culture, and a more educative way as well.
Do you have many stories that are passed down in this manner?
The whole of history actually has been passed down in this manner. We have stories of Mahabharata and Ramayana and stories from the Puranas and the Vedas, all of them being passed down like this.
Can you tell me one of these stories that you'll be dancing for us?
I'll dance one of those stories for you.
Thank you.
In the land of Krishna, everyone, the young, the old, the women, they all used to worship Lord Indra, the god of rain, who used to send rain to the land and ensure good crops. With time, he became very arrogant and stopped sending rain to the country. One day, when all of them were going to worship Indra, Krishna came and asked them, "Where are you going?" They said, "We are going to worship our Lord Indra." Krishna stopped them, said, "No, don't go there. Worship the mountain, Govardhan instead." They agreed and went to worship him. Indra came to know that he was not being worshipped anymore. He was angry. He decided to punish the people by sending rain, thunder, and flooding the country. People asked Lord Krishna for help. He came and lifted the mountain on his little finger and asked the people to come below the mountain, and thus saved his devotees.
That's very impressive. Another example in which a culture is being taught and handed down to subsequent generations over the years. Perhaps we should learn from that. But of course we are still learning about our own culture and identity. I'm here in Derby at the Royal School for the Deaf to see Wendy Daunt and Jerry Hanafin teaching the art of storytelling through sign language.
Now, you ready for this?
Oh, yeah.
Right, I'm going to tell you the story of Little Red Riding Hood, okay? Now, once upon a time, Mother was making some cakes and putting icing on top of them. And then the phone rang, so she went to answer it. And then called Little Red Riding Hood over and said, "Look, your grandmother's not very well. She's rather poorly. Could you take some of these cakes, if I wrap them up, and take them to your grandma and give them to her?" And Little Red Riding Hood said, "Yes, Mummy, I'll do that." And Mummy said, "Now, don't go off the path. Don't go into the woods. Stay on the path until you get to Grandma's house. Do you promise? Yes, I promise. So she gave her the cakes and then went with her to the door and waved her bye-bye. Little Red Riding Hood ran to the woodsman and said, "Help, help, there's a wolf after me." And the wolf came snapping and snarling, so the woodsman put Little Red Riding Hood behind him and killed the wolf with his axe. Then he went with Little Red Riding Hood back to her house. And with Mummy and Grandma, they all had a party. They laid some food on the table and had a wonderful chat, chit-chatting all evening, and they were really happy. And that's the end of the story.
Oh, wasn't that nice?
Okay.
Right, now, did you like that story?
Yes, that's my favourite story. My mum and dad have signed that story to me, so I know what the story's all about.
Now, sorry, but we really ought to go over to the back wall and have a look at the pictures, all right? Okay, come on then. Now, I'm sure you've all got different ideas, so let's have them. Now, the original story that Jerry signed is really a hearing story. And now they're discussing ways of introducing deaf culture and deaf identity into that story. Right, now when Red Riding Hood is skipping along, she can't hear the wolf. How will she know he's there?
I know, the wolf's shadow, his snout and his ears.
Right, the ears,
No,
the
the
shadow.
shadows. Then she'd turn and he wouldn't be there.
And then he's gone.
I know, the leaves on the trees would move and she'd be able to see them out of the corners of her eyes, and she'd be really scared when she turned around.
The wolf growls. Growls and snarls, right.
If they were deaf, they'd have a doorbell with flashing lights in the house.
So if they were deaf, they'd have doorbells. And there were no
With
doorbells
flashing
in the
lights?
story? Oh, what about you?
They were all hearing in the story because Mr. Hannafin didn't say they were signing. He said they were all talking and shouting, so that means they were all hearing.
That's right. Fantastic. The children want to include flashing doorbells and minicoms. It's great to see young children having a sense of pride in their own culture and identity. Is this the way forward? What about real deaf stories? Well, I hope these children will acquire the skills needed so that when they're adults they can pass on deaf stories, making deaf folklore a reality.
No, that's wrong. She can't hear. It's the shadows.
No.
He'd be signing with claws like this, saying, "Good morning."
What's your name?
Little Red Riding Hood. Mummy was in the kitchen making some cakes and putting little swirls of icing on top of them, and then putting little cherries on top of that. Now she decided she had to ring Grandma, who was deaf, so she went and made a call on the minicom. Then she called a little girl over and said, "Little Red Riding Hood, Grandma's rather poorly. Do you think you could go round to her and take some of these cakes with you?" "Yes, certainly, Mummy." "All right, then. Now listen, don't go off the path. You must follow the path until you get to the house. You promise?" "Yes, Mummy." "Now there you are. Put your coat on, and off you go." So she opened the door, gave Little Red Riding Hood a kiss, and said bye-bye. And off Little Red Riding Hood went, skipping through the woods on the path. And then she came across a rabbit. "Oh, hello, what's your name?" she said. "My name is Rabbit," said the rabbit. And off he went. "Isn't he lovely?" she said. Then she thought she saw the trees move and saw a shadow that frightened her. But there was nothing there. And then she saw a funny shadow with long ears and a long nose and a long tail. But then the wolf ran ahead and ran to the house and came up to the door and rang the doorbell, and all the lights flashed. The wolf opened the door, and there was Grandma lying in bed with her nightcap on and her glasses on, lying snoring in bed. And the wolf crept up to the bed, woke Grandma up and growled, and Grandma jumped out of bed and ran away. So the wolf climbed into the bed, put on a nightcap, put on the glasses, and lay in bed, pretending to be Grandma. Little Red Riding Hood came skipping along the path and arrived at the house with the cakes and rang the doorbell, and the lights all flashed. She opened the door and went inside and saw Grandma with these great big ears. And she said, "These are all the better to hear with, my dear." And saw her with great big eyes, and she said, "These are all the better to see you with, my dear." And then saw these great big teeth. And the wolf said, "These are all the better to eat you with, my dear." Little Red Riding Hood ran out of the house and was chased by the wolf. She came to a woodsman, and she said, "Help, help, there's a wolf chasing me, he's going to eat me." And when the wolf came up, the woodsman put Little Red Riding Hood behind him and killed the wolf with his axe. Then when it was dead, he said, "Are you all right, Little Red Riding Hood?" She said, "Yes, I'm all right." So they went off together back to the house, and Grandmother and Mummy and all of them got together and had a party, and they sat there and had a great conversation using science. And they were really happy, and that's the end of the story. And that's it for this year. Thanks to all our colleagues for your contributions to the programme. We've enjoyed watching your films, and we've also been thrilled to speak to friends in Sweden and the USA. May we wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.